Had you already been approached at that point about the deal with Phil Parsons and the Skull team, or did that come after Charlotte?
That was going on all summer, and I kept turning it down because I was tickled. I was happy where I was at. Wasn't making a great deal of money, but I'm not money motivated, So U.S. Tobacco kept approaching me. And then we get down to the end of the year with Richard, and all of a sudden you're hearing all these rumblings of Mike Curb's coming in to buy it, and they're going to move to Kannapolis, and they're going to bring this guy in and that guy in. And I said, well, I'm going to watch this deal a little bit closer here, because I'm not necessarily all in board on this deal, So Johnny Hayes from U.S. Tobacco kept calling me, and I kept in touch with him. I says, man, I'm looked after. I probably can't do this deal. And he said, well, we'll hang in there and let you know. So anyways, we go to Charlotte for the last race, and or the last race at Charlotte. And I'd heard rumblings of some of the people that were going to come in and work in the shop and stuff like that, and I probably wasn't on board with that deal. So the one guy was walking down pit road at Charlotte, and we had the car on the line. Just put the window net up, and back in the day, the crew chief did that. Now some guy does that, but I'm walking back to the pit road, and this guy comes up, and I said, hey, I hear you're coming to join us next year. And I said, he said, yeah, everything's set. And I said, okay, well, good deal, man. And I didn't even go to the pits. I went back to the Skull Treader to Johnny Higgs. I knew he's in there. And I said, is that deal still on? And he says, absolutely, we're waiting for you. And I said, talk to you after the race. And I went back out. And so that's how that deal come about. It was
how hard a decision was it to leave level cross?
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, that was a tough deal. But when they were leaving level cross, the team ownership was changing, the personnel was changing. It made it a lot easier. This is another fact. Linda came to my apartment in Greensboro 3 times and tried to talk me into staying. And she said, "Oh man, Richard just really wants you to stay." Blah blah blah. And I says, "Well, if he had told me that, I might have had a different thing." And she go, "I know, that's just Richard. He don't tell, he can't show his emotions, and tell what it's like."
So you talked to Linda, and I would assume that was a difficult enough conversation to have.
Yeah.
But then you go and you're working for Richard, and was it Richard and Leo at that point?
Richard owned Phil's deal. Leo ran Benny's deal.
Oh, okay, all right.
And they had Cliff Champion and Andy Petrie over there.
Yeah.
And then in our side we had myself, Ronnie Adcox, and Gary Snipes. I'm trying to think. Gary Brooks.
Yeah.
Love Gary Brooks. Scott Robinette. Just a great bunch of guys. We had a ball there because we basically just started the whole deal, the whole team and everything, at one time.
So there's this lady there in the shop, and bookkeeper, I think. Tell me about meeting Debbie.
Knocked my socks off. Yeah. Yeah, she just Debbie Gantz. She worked there at the office, and I wasn't looking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was racing.
Yeah.
This little old gal in the front office, I just sparked me, I guess, and we got married and had 2 wonderful kids and had 20-some years together. It was awesome. Just great deal,
Working with Richard Childress and then Richard Jackson, were you actively looking for some sort of ride the whole time, or was your focus solely on working on the car?
Richard Jackson, an amazing man. My dad's my dad, and just irreplaceable, but Richard Jackson was number 2. He was just my man, and I just totally enjoyed working with him. He was just such an amazing guy. So at the end of the we ran for Rookie of the Year with Phil Parsons against Rusty Wallace at that, and we ended up second in that. Run pretty good, run not so good. He drove Roger Hamby's stuff, I think, for 8-10 races, and then we ran the speedways with our stuff. I thought we had pretty good cars. It just was no magic there. You know what I mean? I thought so much of Scott and Gary and Snipes and all the boys. That was a tough deal there. But what happened there was, after that year was done, Bill Anderson came to me from Anderson Webb Trucking in Mount Airy and said he was a friend of Ricky Rudd because Bill Anderson co-sponsored Richard Childress's stuff back in the 80s. And Bill and Ricky Rudd were tight. Ricky Rudd and I were always tight. So he came to me and says, Larry, he said, I want to start this new Cup team in Mount Airy. I've got a big building. How much would it cost to get everything all put together and we'll start a team? And I said, well, I'm kind of working here at this other deal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I said, I'll come up with some figures. He said, would you be interested in running it? And I said, we'll see, you know what I mean? Because we'll see.
Running it as far as being a manager or a crew chief, or running it as far as being the driver?
Running as far as a crew chief, you know, and running the deal,
yeah.
You know, getting all the people and the equipment and the parts and everything all together. And then I said, well, we'll see, you know. So I come up with this figure. And back then in 85,
yeah,
$300,000 go a long ways. So I don't know what the figure was we come up with. But anyways, I met with Bill Anderson and his wife Ann in Statesville one night, and I got thinking about this deal, and I says, you know, this may work all right. So I got this buddy of mine out of Winston-Salem to draw a picture of a Busch Grand National car. Back then it would be the Pontiac the Grand Prix, with Bill's colors on it, 98 gray, purple, and blue. And I had it under my coat kind of thing, you know. So we went and we ate, and I handed Bill this proposal of how much it would cost to do what he wants to do. And then I said, what I'll do here, Bill, I says, let's do this deal here. I said, let's just do a Busch deal instead. It'll get us our feet wet on getting our equipment together and the cars and the people, truck and trailers, and I'll drive it for nothing. What now? And he said, you ever drove a race car? And I says, yeah. And he said, okay. He says, well, let me think about it. So 2 days later he called me and says, we'll do that. So then I had to go back to Richard Jackson and tell him that I'm going to start driving again, you know. So that was the worst part about that deal, because I loved Richard Jackson. He was just the greatest guy. But the neatest thing was when I went to him and I told him what I was going to do, and he says, man, that's awesome. He says, if you need any help, just let me know. So he really helped the first year, and he built our motors. You know, we bought motors from him, and he was just like right in there with me. Because he'd done all that. He'd been to the South Bostons and all the racetracks with the Busch cars, so I could lean on him as far as what setups to go and stuff. So it was great.
What was it like getting back into the car after a few years out of the seat? Was it like riding a bicycle, or did you feel like you had to shake the rust off a little bit?
A little bit. Yeah, I think so. At this level, you know, if you're a hometown guy, go back, you know, you can kind of fumble your way through. But this deal here, where you go with Jack Ingram and Tommy Houston's and all the guys that tough on that Busch Series, they've been doing it a long time, and you better get your stuff together. So, yes, we got lucky the first race at Hickory. I think we ended up 10th. Brand new team, brand new car. I hadn't been in a car for 6 years. So, no, we were tickled to death. But, yes, had to get back going again. And so the next race was Rockingham. They wouldn't let us run Daytona, which was great. NASCAR wouldn't let me run Daytona, which super. That would give us time to get ready for Hickory. Next race was Rockingham. And we built a speedway car. And I'm in the motor thing getting ready to go to Rockingham. Old Bill Anderson comes in. He leans on the fender and he says, "Hey, Larry," he says, "about got ready to go?" And I says, "Yeah, I think so." He says, he looked at me, he says, "You ever drove at Rockingham?" And I says, "Nope." The biggest thing I drove is half a mile.
Yeah, yeah.
He says, "We'll be all right," and walked off.